You are listening to the Ivy Podcast. Learn from the thought leaders in areas of strategy, innovation, negotiation, and all things leadership. We interview the Ivy League, Fortune 100, and top startups. Now, here's your host, John Karsibayev.
On this episode of the Ivy Podcast, we welcome Ameesh Paleja, who is the Chief Technology Officer of OfferUp, a mobile marketplace in the US for local buyers and sellers. Ameesh, former CTO of Starz and co-founder and CEO of Atom Tickets, is overseeing OfferUp's engineering and data science teams and responsible for strategic aspects of the technology organization, including infrastructure, security, product engineering, and architecture. Prior to joining OfferUp, Ameesh oversaw the modernization of Starz technology platform as a CTO, enabling their international expansion and managing the overhaul of the company's digital media and publishing pipeline. Ameesh spent more than 10 years at Amazon, where he was the founding employee of Amazon's digital research and development facility in Southern California. Welcome to the Ivy Podcast, Ameesh. Ameesh, so you're approximately 10 months into the role of CTO of OfferUp. Which accomplishments are you most proud of during the time with the company?
You know, it's an incredibly talented group of individuals. The team has been moving really fast and really kind of scrappy for the last 4 or 5 years. What I'm really proud about is taking that group of people and really applying a level of discipline and kind of enterprise software architecture to the company. We are approaching fairly significant scale, and we're about to kind of grow even more next year. So I wanted to make sure that we had the right systems and processes in place, and so kind of teaching the individuals in the organization how to operate, how to be kind of operators, and the best kind of architecture and coding design is the biggest thing that I can say I've accomplished in the last 10 months. That's great.
So a little further on that, you come from executive roles with large corporations like Starz and Amazon. What has motivated or attracted you the most to join a smaller, 8-year-old startup as OfferUp?
It's a great question. There's great things about working for big companies. You learn a lot. You learn how to learn. But I think the biggest thing that attracted me to OfferUp was, one, the size of the opportunity. I mean, this is not a $1 million opportunity. It's not a $1 billion opportunity. It's a $1 trillion opportunity in the commerce space. And so that's an exciting, big, meaty problem to sink my teeth into. And then the second part is really the people and the culture of the company. So when I looked for my next gig, I was really looking for a place that combined a challenge that I could really have an impact on, and the kind of people that are working there. Nick and our CEO and founder have created a really great culture inside the company, and we're tackling a gigantic problem. So the thing I love about OfferUp is it's a big space, but more importantly, my ability to impact is very large as well. So it's I can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Great, that makes sense, and definitely clarifying that. So OfferUp, you guys are based in Bellevue, Washington, but you have offices here in South Florida. We've seen a significant growth in IT companies here, in South Florida, such as Magic Leap, Farelogix. Can you expand on your strategy to add presence here?
Yeah, so hiring engineers is incredibly competitive. There is a strong demand, and it outpaces the supply. So it's important for us to kind of reach out into new markets to find great talent. And as I was kind of surveying the entire country, both onshore, nearshore, and offshore, I really wanted to find a pool of talent that had not been tapped into as aggressively as other major markets like the Bay Area or Seattle or New York or LA. And so looking around, Miami actually came across my radar with great companies like this in the market, really great talent. Work ethic is super strong in South Florida. And lastly, Miami is a great OfferUp town. We have great penetration here, and so bringing all these things together, it was only natural for us to open up a new office here.
That makes sense, and definitely, I'm a heavy user of OfferUp myself. My wife sells a lot and buys a lot on that, so definitely I can relate. And what what are the projections in terms of growth for you guys here in South Florida? Are you looking to continue growing the presence here, South Florida?
Yes. So we started off with a little over a dozen, and I'm pleased to say that we're hiring very, very quickly. My expectation is in 2020 that we're going to be expanding substantially into this office, and as long as we keep finding amazing talent that we are, I don't see us stopping.
Right. Okay. So OfferUp competes with Craigslist, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, and last year the company added the ability to ship items, which expands its competitor base to now include Amazon. Which differentiating factors will play into company strategy to compete in such a tight market?
This is a very good question. There's a lot of marketplaces out there, and the first thing I would say is not a zero-sum game. You can kind of post on any and all of these places. But what I would tell you about OfferUp and really focusing on us is first, we're very focused on our mission to create a great local marketplace. Enabling customers to buy and sell and really focusing on their success is the most important thing. We are not overly focused on trying to increase ad load or any other business directions. Our primary goal is to help buyers and sellers connect, and that's the big part of it. The second big part is trust and safety is a big part of our mission as well. So we want to make sure that customers are safe. So we have community meetup spots. We take many measures from a machine learning perspective and a data science perspective to ensure that we're eliminating poor actors out of the platform, so that customers who want to use OfferUp are happy and excited about using OfferUp, and they're able to buy and sell quickly and efficiently.
That's great. Good portion of our listeners, second-year MBAs, mostly Ivy League, and if some of them are interested in building their careers or getting started with OfferUp, can you provide a glimpse into the company culture and what type of people tend to succeed?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's actually one of the reasons I was so attracted to the company. I can say for all your listeners, this is an incredibly important part of your decision-making criteria. Make sure you look at the culture before you pick a company. So for me and for OfferUp in general, we have a set of operating principles that we kind of run the company by. But there's a principle called DNA, which is driven, neighborly, and adaptable. With that, they're kind of self-explanatory, but basically speaking, if you're going to come and work for a startup, you really have to have something called startup stomach, the ability to handle all the high highs and the low lows. The amplitude of your successes and your failures are going to be very, very high and low, and so it's incredibly important that you have the tenacity and fortitude to kind of last through those things. And when we talk about kind of being driven and neighborly and adaptable, those are the qualities that will help you be successful, not only at OfferUp, but actually at any small and medium-sized company. It's your ability to handle what's thrown at you and being able to say, you know what, I see a problem, I'm just going to pick it up and run with it. That's going to be an important and critical factor for your ability to succeed.
Great. I like that startup stomach. That's a great way to describe some of the things that you guys are actually building within the organization. So thank you for sharing that. When hiring for OfferUp, for those candidates that get to your level to interview with you, do you tend to get creative with your interviews? And if so, what do you look for in some of the responses?
Yeah, so the days of asking kind of the crazy riddles and puzzles are generally over. What I tend to do is I tend to do two things. One is we do competency-based interviews. So each one of the interviewers is assigned a different dimension in which to interview the candidate on, and they're really focused on diving really deep rather than getting a wide, shallow view of that person. And the process in which we do that gives us a really comprehensive look at all candidates and the ability to kind of dive deep on all different types of leadership qualities, whether it's are they customer obsessed, do they know how to simplify, or can they disagree and commit. And so typically I will have a competency assigned to me just like everybody else does, and my job is to really kind of go deep in it. One of the ways that I try to kind of make the interview a little bit more fun and engaging is I try to give problems that we're actually facing as a company in the moment. I tend to kind of obfuscate some of the kind of specific details, but generally speaking, we're always tackling one interesting or challenging problem or another at any given time, and I can usually frame up those questions and see how the candidates are working through those problems. It actually also gives me a very quick and easy way to compare how they think about problems with the rest of my staff. And that provides a very interesting compare and contrast opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Great, and thank you for providing that insight. So there you go for a lot of our listeners. If you guys get to interview with Ameesh, you have some insider information. But yeah, definitely makes sense. As far as looking for that, that connection as far as not only personality but also from the technical skill domain as well. I'm sure there's a lot of different tools that you guys also use for like technical expertise validation, and that's I think those are interesting strategies. So from your perspective, what are some of the most in-demand skill set that OfferUp is looking for these days? What are the most challenging ones to find? The reason I ask is because we also operate in that space, so I'm curious to hear if some of our things align with what are we seeing, especially in this South Florida market.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, I'm going to go back to that startup stomach. It's incredibly important. So finding people that have the capability to be adaptable in particular is critically valuable to us. And so screening for that is an important part. But when we get into kind of specific technical skills, whether we're talking about product managers, designers, or engineers, what I would say is deep analytical and metrics-driven thinking is critically important. I'm not saying you have to be a PhD in mathematics, but you definitely need to be comfortable in Excel. You definitely need to be able to look at KPIs and understand what is the data telling us about our customers, because we operate at such a large scale that it's less about kind of user studies and less about talking to 4 or 5 people and more about, hey, I'm looking at what in the last 20 minutes 100,000 people have done X or 500,000 people have done Y, and is this experiment working or not working? So I think analytics capabilities is critically important. When we get into kind of specific technologies on the tech front, I would say security is becoming more and more important. Just like any big company, OfferUp faces attacks from lots of hackers, et cetera, and we are incredibly vigilant on behalf of our customers to make sure that everybody's safe. We always want to make sure that our guest experience is getting better and better over time. So data science is a big opportunity. There's an incredible shortage of talented data scientists in the country. I would say in the world. It's becoming more and more important for the success of any company. And I would say, look, in the next 5 years, if you're a company, you don't think about yourself as a tech company or using data science in the right way, you're kind of a dead man walking, because people are going to disrupt you very, very quickly. And so, we want to make sure that we're finding the right talent there, and of course, the foundational, just great software engineers, people who know how to architect and build systems for scale.
Right. Great. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And I can relate to some of the things that we see out there on the market as well. Securities, unemployment is almost in the negative.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, data science, it's absolutely, you nailed it right on the head. Someone who's really able to work with some of the actionable data versus just, there's a lot of data, but how do you actually translate it to some actions? And I think you guys being the startup allows you to move a lot faster and implement things on, almost, by the minute.
And that's an incredibly important point that you're making, is that we are also looking for people that can apply their skill set to a business or a customer problem. Oftentimes I run across many engineering candidates that are technical for the sake of being technical, but they don't contextualize what they're doing and why it's valuable for our customers. And I think that's a critical aspect of being successful, particularly at a startup, is that you gotta always keep your eye on the ball. You gotta be customer obsessed. That's the only way to win. And so if they not only demonstrate kind of the core technical skills, but they can layer in business thinking or customer experience thinking on top of that, that makes those candidates incredibly valuable.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You make a very good point from that perspective. So with approximately 44 million users and downloads exceeding 75 million, there must be a need for such niche domain skill set as security and site reliability engineers that you and I briefly spoke about earlier. What strategies have you deployed to attract professionals with such critical and hard to find skill set in already tight market?
You're describing one of the most challenging parts of my job. The long and short of it is as simple is that first and foremost we go through our networks, right? That's the best way. If we know people or we know kind of first order, second order connections, that's the best way to go find people because we could at least have a warm introduction. As you said, the unemployment rate in this area is approaching 0%. So almost all of these candidates already have jobs and they're all passive in the first place. So you've got to kind of pluck them out of existing situations. So I think first and foremost, knowing the right people is very helpful. But secondly, if you don't know those people, then I think the second way to go find it is find companies that you admire. And typically in these particular spaces, whether it's SRE or infrastructure or security, many of them are actually prolific bloggers. They'll talk about it. They'll be active in the community. They'll be active at conventions like DEF CON. You'll be able to find interesting work from them and opinions from them to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, and that's a big part of of the search. And then once you find those people, I think it's important that you have a credible and interesting story to tell them that's compelling for them to want to move. Right, so not just finding them as one piece, but then actually showing them the opportunity and what they could be working on and the kinds of problems and challenges that they could be tackling, I think is a big part of getting that top talent.
Great, and I like what you highlight in terms of going non-traditional ways almost for networking, whether that attending certain conferences or looking for some of the content that some of these professionals actually put out, so that you can easily identify what are they passionate about and how making that connection. I think that's a great strategy.
You'd be surprised at how much you can learn about people on Twitter. Like there's security Twitter, SRE Twitter. There's a lot of interesting threads that you can identify. These are the guys who know what they're talking about, and these are the girls that really can make it happen. And so that's exciting to me, and that's kind of a unusual tactic, but I think it works.
Yeah, you got to get creative.
You got to get creative in this space. Yeah,
absolutely. And we briefly talked about platforms like Stack Overflow as well. We were able to identify and find some very, very creative, very extremely rare talent on platforms like this, where those professionals actually contribute to the open source platforms like this, their knowledge, their expertise. So usually that says a lot about someone's personality to be able to work in a team environment, especially if it's startup and it's moving so fast.
That's right. Yeah. If they're willing to help a stranger, imagine how they're going to act in a team.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That's definitely what we look for as well. So as the company aims for profitability, OfferUp has boosted its leadership team significantly with executives from companies like eBay, Microsoft, and Amazon. To the extent that you can, please share with us what is on the roadmap for OfferUp in 2020.
Well, I can tell you we're continuing to grow. Without talking about kind of any confidential projects, we're still focused on building out great local commerce and enabling a local marketplace. And so, as you see, we're expanding our team here in Miami. I think part of our goals is to really get closer to our customers and really understand in-depth needs of how we can help them be successful. As a simple example, small businesses around the country use OfferUp to help sell tons of stuff. In fact, we have a furniture vendor in Seattle who's friends with our founder, Nick, and they told us that they sold several $1 million worth of furniture just taking pictures with our consumer-based app. And so when we're looking into the future, we're really thinking about how do we help enable those customers to be much more successful and create a better guest experience for them.
Mm-hmm. Great, and definitely thank you for sharing that. One of the things that you brought up is that user experience with something as simple as that consumer facing application. At least from my perspective, it's extremely user-friendly. In terms of growth and adding new features, I'm sure you guys are very careful about not impacting that experience. Do you guys do a lot of experimentation, prototyping, piloting internally before it becomes available to public?
100%. So I would characterize us as a culture of metrics. So one of the big things that we do whenever we roll out any feature is we run A/B tests. And so as a part of our process to roll out any new feature sets, we actually identify a set of KPIs that are currently important to the marketplace. We understand what's impacting those and kind of seasonality and variability against those. And then as we introduce new features, we will roll up experiments at 5%, 10%, 15%, so that we can start seeing not only how customers who are getting the experiment, how they're reacting to it, but how does it actually affect the downstream marketplace. And this becomes a pretty complicated problem because these metrics are not as simple as like, oh, did clicks go up or down? They're intricately woven together with very nuanced changes across many different KPIs. And so you kind of have to be incredibly vigilant at this point in a complex marketplace like ours, where a small change in one side can actually negatively impact or positively impact other metrics that you weren't even thinking about. So it's incredibly important that we kind of keep an eye on the ball for a lot of these things. One of the strategies that we take is that if we don't know and we don't understand what's going to be touched, we start looking at statistical variation between those metrics. So if something goes up or down more than one standard deviation, then we can say, hey, there's something for us to look at on this. But A/B testing is at the core and the heart of everything we do. It's the only way to operate in this day and age.
That's great, and that's exciting to hear that the company promotes that experimentation and no fear of failure almost.
That's right.
During my time at HBS, we have a professor, Stefan Tompe. He teaches a lot of that experimentation, and how it gives some. There's a lot of case studies on companies like thebooking.com, and where you're empowered to experiment, to release, but it's on you, creates that sense of accountability.
That's right.
So that's very exciting to hear that you guys also operate in that space and creating culture of
And that's the big part. We want to make sure that we've created a culture that people aren't afraid of failure. What I would tell you is that I don't get mad when people make mistakes. I get mad only at negligence. And so if people make the same mistake over and over again, I get frustrated with that. But in the case of, hey, I had the right data, I looked at the customer opportunity, here was a proposal, we all kind of took our best guess at it, because you're not going to have perfect data all the time. You're going to have some things that work and some things that don't work, but it's okay to try. That's the only way we're gonna move the ball forward. And every once in a while, you're going to hit a home run, and that's going to be an incredibly valuable improvement to your customer product.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend that book, and in fact, I'll send it your way, because I found a lot of valuable lessons in terms of creating that culture of experimentation. So definitely looking forward to sharing that with you. So on that note, when we're talking about books, what are you currently reading, and what is one book that you always recommend to others?
So I read a ton for work all the time, whether it's thousands of Slack messages and emails and docs and PR FAQs and 6-pagers, etc. at work. So from a business perspective, Good to Great is a classic, right? That's one of my go-tos. If anybody asks me what's my favorite management book, that's really it. The big lesson out of that I would say, and I'm going to be a little bit reductive, so I apologize for slimming this down, but it's all about getting the right people on the bus. If I can impart any piece of wisdom to your listeners at all, the simple thing is that people are your most valuable asset, and you got to have the right people before you can go tackle any problem. So that's really exciting, and that's kind of a core message of that book. And then for fun, I enjoy fiction. So I read a lot of science fiction, and just read Metro 2033, which is a dystopian future written by a Russian author, people living in the subways. But yeah.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, we'll make the links to these books available with the episode notes. Ameesh, I know you're a very busy guy. You travel the country and the world, extensively. Anything in closure, anything that we have not touched upon you'd like to mention?
No, I'm excited. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here, and good luck to all your listeners.
Awesome. Thank you so much for finding time to meet with us.
Thank you for listening to the Ivy Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our RSS feed on ivypodcast.com and all major podcasting platforms like Spotify and iTunes. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a rating on iTunes.